And joining us now in studio, Don Tapscott, co-author of Macroeconomics, New Solutions for a Connected Planet. Welcome back. Okay, yesterday we looked at how the digital revolution is transforming the media industry. Today we're going to focus at how it's changing government. Before we do that, though, I want to look at the concept of Web 2.0. What is that?
Well, the Web 2.0 is just a simple term that refers to the fact that the internet of today is very different than the web of the .com period. Back then we accessed computers through and the internet through something on a desktop that was tethered to the internet with a wire. Now we have billions and trillions of inert objects in our world that become smart communicating devices. I mean, my hotel room last night, the door had a chip in it, and it was probably an internet appliance. I have a friend actually in Toronto. Everything in his house that has electrical power has what's called an IP address, which means it's connected to the internet. And all these things talk to each other. I have no idea what his toaster says to his refrigerator. He was actually bragging that his fence talks to his sprinkler system. I said, well, why would you care? He says, well, Don, if a burglar comes over the fence, the sprinkler is my first line of defense. So, but this is, and the new internet is not about the presentation of content. It's a global platform for collaboration, and that's a huge difference. It's rich in media. And it's geospatial. You go with your little device and you look around, and it's like a video camera, only it's telling you what you're looking at. So this is a huge change.
Okay, so what can government learn from Web 2.0?
Well, it can become government 2.0. You know, the old model of government, the industrial age government, came up at the same time as the industrial age corporation. You know, 90 years ago, the term bureaucracy was a hot new management term, and we needed bureaucracies in governments because we needed to have processes and structures and checks and balances to control the public purse and prevent graft and patronage and corruption and so on. But over time, these government structures have become very fossilized, and we now have these big government hierarchies and bureaucracies that try and do everything for citizens that are really becoming stalled. Along comes the internet, enables us to, in this case, rethink the deep architecture and structure of government, and really how we sort of get capability, how we orchestrate capability to create public value. So let me just, that's a big mouthful, so let me give you an example. One of the big themes is called open government. It's sometimes linked to this notion of government as a platform. The governments, rather than doing everything, can provide citizens with data, and they can self-organize using that data to create new value. And this is a big change, because the old model was, I'm a government, you're a taxpayer, I take money from you, I spend that money on people inside my boundaries that create services, and we deliver them back to you. We hope you enjoy our services. Well, the new model is, yeah, I'm going to keep doing a lot of that, but for the growing number of things that we need government for, we're going to let the citizens participate in that process. So I'll just give you an example. I was in Australia in Melbourne, and I was meeting with the CEO of Melbourne. Melbourne has a CEO. And I was talking to her, and I said, let's take an example. What data do you have here in Melbourne? Just give me an example of some data that you're currently not giving to citizens. And she comes up with this thing called bicycle accidents. So, which is a great thing to come up with. I said, great, here's what you do. You have data about bicycle accidents, you release it. Just give it away, raw data. I said within 48 hours, someone will do a Google mashup and a map of Melbourne showing all the dangerous places to go on a bicycle. People on bikes will avoid those. You'll be saving lives in a week. It costs you $0 to do it.
Did she do it?
I haven't followed up with her, but I'm guessing she did, because now, this was a couple of years ago, cities everywhere are doing this.
You know, the debate about government is often polarizing. There are those that argue we need bigger government. There are those who say it's bloated, yeah, we need less. Can the internet deliver on both those viewpoints?
Absolutely. You can have your cake and eat it too, if you do what I'm talking about. You see, because for governments to become a platform, this enables a new division of labor in society about how we create what we used to call services, or what we call public value. So saving lives in Melbourne is a new government service, but it's not created by the government. See, it's created by the government providing some leadership in releasing raw data. But there's a new division of labor to create the service involving individual citizens, maybe involving a private company, in this case Google, involving a civil society organization, maybe a safety group or something in Melbourne. They get together and they create the value.
Prosumer.
Well, yeah, the customer becomes a producer of government.
And what does that do for sort of citizen collaboration? You speak about something called participatory budgeting.
Yes.
Talk to me more about that.
Well, we've just been talking about how to change the business of government. Now there's a second topic, which is how to change the nature of governance itself, or the nature of democracy. And again, the old industrial age model, as we describe in the book, was the one-to-many model. You know, I'm a politician, you vote for me, and then I rule. And listen up for 4 years while I tell you all kinds of stuff, but you're passive. And this was a great model. Compared to what existed before, where kings and nobles made all the decisions for everybody. But we created these representative institutions, but there was a weak public mandate and inert citizenry. We can move towards a second era of democracy 2.0, if you like, that's based on a culture of public deliberation and active citizenship. So there's no reason why governments can't be using the internet to engage citizens in all kinds of new ways, not just in creating services, but in creating the actual democratic process itself. For example, if I were the Prime Minister, what's a big issue in Canada? I don't know.
Healthcare.
Healthcare. Immigration. Employment. Why not have a digital brainstorm, a 3-day conversation of the entire country to come up with ideas on how to solve this problem? You know what? You'd come up with a ton of great ideas. And this is not direct democracy. I don't know if you remember Ross Perot in the electronic town hall. You vote every night on the evening news. That's a bad idea. The democracy is a lot more than majority rule on a nightly basis. One of the things it's about is protecting the rights of minorities. So I'm not arguing for that. I'm arguing for new models where citizens come up with ideas, where citizens get engaged, where citizens contribute to making a better country in ways that the internet now enables. And this is a radical change to the entire democratic process, and it's one that we desperately need right now.
Okay, the way you lay it out, seems simple. Why doesn't Prime Minister Harper call a bunch of people, get them on a, collaborating, talking to each other, let's come up with solutions? It seems to me, though, in practicality, this must be much harder because it doesn't happen. So I'm wondering, what currently, the government structures that we have, are they just simply stifling innovation? Why is it stifling innovation?
Well, I've just been describing a new paradigm, if you like, or a new approach or mental model. And leaders of old paradigms have the greatest difficulty embracing the new. But this is happening now all around the world. And it is happening in Canada. The British Columbia government is now doing a series of challenges. They did one called, a challenge is basically a glorified contest. They did one called Apps for Climate Change. And what they did is they challenged the entire software industry to come up with some apps that would help reduce carbon. And to facilitate that, they gave away a ton of data, everything that they know about carbon. And the prize was nothing. I think it was like $25,000. But for that, they generated millions of dollars of economic activity. And what happened, the winner that I saw, you could, from your little device, you could look at all the carbon being emitted by your company. You'd turn off the lights on one floor of a building and the carbon would go down. So, this is even happening in the developing world. I just got back from Latin America. I was in Brazil yesterday. But I've been working with the Chamber of Commerce in Colombia. And the situation there is that the mayor was about to go to jail. His brother was already in jail. And the main contractor had ripped up, for the transportation system, ripped up all the roads to put in an LRT and ran out of money and then disappeared. So the city's completely dysfunctional. The Chamber of Commerce got involved to fill the gap, and they created an engagement process called the Heartbeat of Bogota, where they solicited ideas for the mayoral candidates, and they confronted these candidates with these ideas. And some of them were really, they had real teeth, like, okay, television's going, all the candidates there, would you or would you not adopt the International Development Bank's software for open procurement for all government tendering? Yes or no? It's not hard. See or no? And of course, they all had to say see. Well, now the Chamber of Commerce can hold their feet to the fire because the citizens are engaged. And if they adopt this software, it's going to be very difficult to be corrupt like the old government was.
One area that people would give you a lot of pushback on your ideas is the idea of regulation. How functional would you say the government's current system of regulation is? Not the government, government.
Well, it's an industrial age model of regulation that we'll just keep hiring regulators and try and regulate all this stuff. And obviously it didn't work in the United States around financial services. That lack of a good mortgage structure like we had in Canada almost brought down global capitalism. And you go to something like the Consumer Electronics Show, there are 22,000 new products that were released at the last one. So what are you going to do? Hire more regulators to make sure they're not emitting, bad radiation, or they don't have lead in them, or something like that? I mean, the whole issue of regulation is kind of coming to a giant log jam. So we need a new model.
And what is that new model?
Well, in macroeconomics, we call it the citizen regulator. And it really has to do with transparency. That now transparency is this powerful new force that people everywhere can, better than before, not perfectly, but better than before, they can find out what's really going on. They can scrutinize companies and their products, and they can even organize collective responses. So companies everywhere, and for that matter, all institutions, are kind of becoming naked. And as we said, if you're going to be naked, well, fitness is no longer optional, or you have to get buff. And that's what regulators were trying to do. They were trying to get companies to be buff, to have good value and to have values sort of baked into their products, to not be externalizing their costs onto society, or having dangerous products, or doing innovations in the financial industry that would hurt. So now there are new mechanisms whereby citizens can get engaged and start to hold companies or governments' feet to the fire, just like the Chamber of Commerce is doing in Bogota. They're becoming citizen regulators.
Okay, I want to move just beyond the relationship between citizen and nation and look at how this model could be used to help solve global problems. Tell me the story about Kiva.org.
Well, for some reason, first of all, we have a lot of problems in the world, and they're getting worse. And for some reason, our big international institutions like the World Bank couldn't get a $70 pump to a farmer in sub-Saharan Africa where they can stand on the pump and irrigate a whole field. So Kiva created this network for microfinancing, where in very small donations, $50, $25, they've now raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're helping solve a problem in the world that's called poverty. And that's called the effects of climate change too. So this is like a tip of the iceberg of a very radical thing that's underway, where we have all these old institutions, and they really came out of the end of the Second World War. It's a previous time in history. 40 countries got together at Bretton Woods, and they created the World Bank and the United Nations, and eventually we had the International Monetary Fund and the G8 and the G20 and all these global institutions that are based on nation states. Good idea, except the world is not just a collection of nation states. We have a global economy. We have a global biosphere. We have global citizens and so on. And so these old institutions are really stalled, and they're failing. And because of the internet, new models are emerging.
Are they irrelevant? Things like the UN.
Well, there's some people who say they are. I don't think they are. I don't think we should get rid of the UN. But there are also lots of tough issues with these new network models too. This is actually my biggest project right now. I'm doing a project for the World Economic Forum, and it's called New Network Models of Global Problem Solving. And Coney 2012 would be a great example. I don't, did you
Everyone's
see
watched Coney, right?
Well, actually, you'd be surprised. There are humans who have not. When I first watched that thing, on a Monday night, 12,000 people had seen it. By Friday, 100 million people. And you know, the videos done by this group called Invisible Children, and they're trying to make this Ugandan warlord who's kidnapped 60,000 kids and turn them into soldiers and sex slaves and so on. They're trying to track this guy down. So you have this video that's watched by all these people. The US Congress takes note, they allocate some funds. Coney will probably get caught because of this thing. But on the other hand, it's inspired, but you know, is it legitimate? Who's it accountable to? You can say what you like about the UN, but at least there's structures for accountability. Where does the money go? How do you determine the policy? I mean, this video and the guy on it, the leader of Invisible Children, is arguing for more US forces in Uganda. Is that a good idea? And then what happens when your leader has a meltdown? Which is what happened. This guy, after 2 or 3 weeks, the pressure was so great, he had a psychiatric breakdown. What do you do? So we've got lots of problems with the old models. The new ones show great potential, but no one really understands them and how to make sure that they work well.
And
that's
arguably not without their own problems either.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about something else, and that's called the Global Agenda Initiative. What's that?
Oh, well, this is the World Economic Forum. Has 70 different, that meets in Davos every year. Has 70 different global agenda councils, they're called. And they're on all kinds of different topics, from, poverty to climate change to infectious disease and terrorism and innovation. And one of the ones that I'm on is what we were talking about in the last show, which is new models of how we inform ourselves as a society. And what I've done now is, from a number of these different global agenda councils, I've created a working group on new models of global problem solving. It's really exciting because we have many of the world's leading thinkers about how to solve problems in the world. I know this sounds a little ambitious. Yeah, I'm going to come up with a whole new approach to solving the world's problems, but I'm at that stage in my career where I figure, what the heck, just go for it.
Go for it. You know, some people have the time and the money to donate to NGOs or even help their efforts, but most of us are, simply too busy, or say we're too busy. Where will the people necessary that are needed to create this sort of collaborative model of global problem solving come from?
Well, they're coming from everywhere. And we've got these sort of, I call them, and we call them in the book, the 4 pillars of society, and they're all getting involved. So the first one that we're used to is the state. And at Bretton Woods, there were a bunch of states there. Okay, then we have the private sector. Now, corporations, and they've never really been involved or thought of as problem solvers in the world. But when you think about it, I mean, who's the most important organization in the world fighting for human rights in China? Is it the US State Department? I don't know, I think you could argue Google. Google's taking on the government of China, and they may win. So they're now part of the picture, but there were no corporations at the table at Bretton Woods. Then we've got the civil society, okay, NGOs and this kind of thing, and there were only a handful of them way back in the 1946 at Bretton Woods. But now the civil society is, what, 10% of the Canadian economy. This is a huge thing. And then we've got this 4th pillar, which is you, which is the individual. So 2 kids, as we described the story, it's the opening story in the book, 2 kids in Boston went on the Ushahidi network and found a 7-year-old girl buried in the rubble in Haiti after the earthquake. Shopping mall had fallen on her. They found her little messages in Creole, translated them into English, geolocated her, informed the authorities. The authorities came in, they saved her life. She was dying. They saved her life. She's fine now. Those 2 kids in Boston were pillars of society. So increasingly, everyone can get involved. But my pitch to people is, don't be a slacktivist. That's what Malcolm Gladwell calls you. There are 200 million people on Facebook. Causes. Those are people who care about changing something. But you don't change the world by going like. Okay? You change the world by actually doing something. And if you look around the world today, it's deeply broken. These problems that we have are not getting solved. They're becoming worse and worse. And we all need to get involved. And we all can get involved now.
You make a call for something called micro-volunteering. Talk to me about that.
Well, that's pretty much the pitch that I just gave, is that you as an individual can now participate in solving a global problem. The crisis in Haiti was not just a problem for Haiti. You can't have a country fail like that and collapse. It was a global problem, and 2 kids in Boston could participate. You can participate in funding some social innovator by going on to Kickstarter. Or for that matter, you can become a venture capitalist if you've got $50 to spend. There was this watch called the Pebble watch that was on Kickstarter. Kickstarter is a microfinancing environment, and President Obama has actually just embraced this thing and said this is a great way for getting innovation kickstarted in the United States. And this Pebble watch did a little video pitch saying we're trying to raise $100,000. At the end of the period to raise the money, they had succeeded rather dramatically. They raised over $10 million. So, and these are just small little donations of people micro-financing an important company.
I guess one of the challenges, though, is that if individuals get so involved, it becomes almost a subjective exercise. So I might fund something that you might not agree with, you know, a position. I might fund the Syrian rebels, let's say, for example. And it allows a lot of individual responsibility. People can make their own choices. Isn't that dangerous when we're all sort of, you know, doing things to fund, to build, to help others based on our own views and opinions?
Well, things are getting out of control, aren't they? And we no longer have powerful corporations and government leaders and leaders of the church telling us what's right and what's to do. Is that a bad thing, or is that a good thing? You know, and it's the promise and the peril of this new media. I mean, the old media could control it. The new media, it's not controllable. It's distributed. It will be what we want it to be. And if we want it to be a platform to map the heavens, as Galaxy Zoo is doing with 275,000 amateur astronomers, they just wrote a paper, the 275,000 of them. They're trying to figure out how to get all their names on the paper for the leading astronomy journal. You know, if you want it to be a platform to discover a cure for AIDS, it will be that. If we want it to be a platform to organize against public education, as people in the Tea Party are doing, it will be that. Or to try and return women back to the home in a sort of God-ordained family where they don't have access to birth control, daycare, and maybe even schooling. They're homeschooling their kids. There are people organizing to make that happen on the internet, and there are people organizing horrific acts of evil. So this will be what we want it to be, and that's my argument to everybody. I mean, get involved, and that's, you know, I mean, that's why we wrote the book, is to kind of be a handbook for people to have a tool for social change.
These groupings, they have power, but they don't have formal power. What does that say? Do they need legitimacy beyond that?
Well, that's a really good question. They have real power. I mean, Coney's going to, I'm quite confident he'll get tracked down, he'll get caught. There are, around climate change, the G+20 has been meeting. I mean, they don't come up with a lot. Meanwhile, there are 20 million people organizing around that issue, and they're not just talking about it. They're not just activists, you know, going like, they're doing things. They're architects figuring out how to retrofit old buildings, and they're kids in schoolyards trying to reduce the carbon. So the whole world is, or big important parts of the world are mobilizing around this issue, and they have real power to change the formal institutions because they're changing public opinion. They're advocates for change. And when the public institutions resist, well, you see what happens. I mean, we saw what happened with the Arab Spring, and where the internet not only drops collaboration costs in the media and in government and business and so on, it drops the costs of dissent and rebellion and even insurrection. And you look at the big student upsurges in Europe and even in Quebec. You know, a lot of people, I've had this debate, like, what are they complaining about, the students? The tuition prices are half of what they are in Ontario. This is not a student tuition rebellion. These are young people that are the tip of the iceberg of a whole generation all around the world that are not happy. They think the world is becoming less fair as it is, and they were told, you work hard, you go to school, you stay out of trouble, you get a degree, you can have a prosperous and happy life. And it turns out that my generation wasn't very accurate in predicting that. So these are big problems that we need to all get involved in fixing. If we don't, I think we'll see a time of great social unrest in the world.
Don, always a pleasure talking to you. I give you the like. Thank you very much for coming in.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.